There's a 620 quid difference between these two smartphones, and the question I've got is, can this one finally beat this one? The answer might surprise you. On the face of it, this looks like a really ridiculous comparison. Why on earth would I compare a smartphone, which is arguably the flagship of flagships in the iPhone 14 Pro Max, with a upstart smartphone which has nothing, and the puns just keep coming, sorry, nothing more than flashing lights and, well, a CEO who gets on a roller coaster with Casey Neistat to its name. This doesn't make sense, does it? Only I think it does, because I love what nothing is doing to the smartphone market. If we take away those flashing lights and the roller coaster antics and the clever marketing, nothing really knows how to shake up a very jaded smartphone market. But when you get a device like this that's well priced, even after a bit of a price hike, and clearly lovingly built, and it has that very interesting marketing campaign behind it, it's hard not to take note. But the question is, can the Nothing Phone 2 really compete with the big boys? Let's find out right after this week's sponsor. And that sponsor is behind this lovely case, and it's Casekoo. The Cloud Cush case is a colourful air-cushioned case for the iPhone, which has cloud-like full edges that provide a silky smooth touch and comforting grip that alleviates pressure. It uses air cushion technology, which offers cloud-like full edge protection for your iPhone, but despite this, it still offers a very solid grip. And it does that while effectively absorbing shocks thanks to its 3-meter military-grade drop resistance. Like all Casekoo stuff, it feels fantastic in the hand. It's definitely a case that I've been able to use for extended periods of time without any fatigue, which does sometimes happen with iPhone cases. So if you use your phone a lot for gaming, texting, or anything else where your phone is regularly in your hand for long periods of time, the Cloud Cush is for you. Casekoo are also holding a special 3-day flash sales event, which runs from August the 7th to August the 9th, and there's going to be a bunch of offers available every single day with up to 40% off normal pricing. To find out more about this fantastic Cloud Cush case and that 3-day sales event, just click the link in the description. So the first question you've probably got is, why on earth compare the Nothing Phone 2 to the iPhone 14 Pro Max specifically? As previously noted, the Nothing Phone 2 is pushing Carl Pei's company into dangerous territory. In the UK, this is 180 quid more expensive than the Nothing Phone 1. At launch, this was $399, which was an absolute no-brainer. This is no longer in no-brainer territory, and the more expensive Nothing phones get, the more they knock on the door of phones like this. The good news for Nothing is that just like the Nothing Phone 1, the Nothing Phone 2 does punch above its weight class. There are some issues which I'll get onto later on, but the performance, the display, the size and build quality, they all knock on the door of much more expensive phones. So I think it's a fair comparison. Let's start by thinking about what makes a fantastic flagship. The first thing, I think, is design. As soon as you get this out the box, it has to look and feel expensive. The iPhone has always scored very highly with this, particularly the Pro Max series, which are just very, very impressive pieces of kit. The second thing is the camera system, which needs to be very reliable and very high quality. Basically, as soon as you point this at something, it should take the photo without any delay and without any need for post-processing. And there should be enough focal lengths to zoom in, to zoom out, and get very close to subjects. They should also shoot very good 4K video to the point where you could use them in professional settings. I use the iPhone 14 Pro Max all the time in this business to shoot video for YouTube. The other thing that makes a very good flagship smartphone is performance, and we're getting to the stage now where chips are so good across the board that it's becoming a bit of a moot point. Most modern smartphones feel very, very speedy in everyday use. It's only when you go beyond that into gaming and whatever else it is that people do with their phones these days that doesn't constitute normal use, where you need a lot of headroom. And the iPhone has always excelled with that. These things are so powerful. And then lastly, there has to be something special. There has to be a thing that very few or no other smartphones on the market has. That might be a stylus, a very high-end camera system like Sony for instance, or in the iPhone's case, and no, it's not the Monkey Island, in the iPhone's case, it's the Apple ecosystem. Let's see how the Nothing Phone 2 stacks up in each of those areas apart from the ecosystem thing, because that's not fair. There's no ecosystem really with Nothing. But as for everything else, the camera, performance, build quality, etc., let's find out. Okay, let's start with design, and I think, personally, although it is very much a personal preference, that the Nothing Phone 2 really is up to speed with the flagship competition when it comes to design and the build quality. And it does have this rounded, or slightly rounded, rear, this glass rear, which is a slight difference from the Nothing Phone 1, which was kind of flat, and just that slight curve, that slight difference, makes a big difference. This feels very premium. When it comes to performance, as I mentioned a moment ago, most phones these days feel very quick in everyday use, and that is definitely the case with the Nothing Phone 2 versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max. If you're just doing email, social media, replying to your mates on WhatsApp, a bit of web surfing here, web surfing, how old am I? Web browsing, all that sort of stuff, they just feel identical. Now, I'm not a smartphone gamer, and I don't do benchmarks, so I can't give you any real world first-hand experience when it comes to how this thing performs at the top end against the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I have consulted some other benchmarks that other people have done, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max absolutely smashes the Nothing Phone 2 by 1,335 points in single core performance, and an even bigger 2,409 points in multi-core performance. Now, I have no idea what that means, but they are very big numbers, and it does illustrate that the iPhone 14 Pro Max is still a lot more performant and has much more headroom than the Nothing Phone 2. Now, that shouldn't come as a surprise. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is a much more expensive phone than the Nothing Phone 2, and also the Nothing Phone 2 doesn't have the latest Snapdragon in it. It has the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 rather than the Gen 2. Moving on to the camera system, and I'd like you to check out this photo taken with the Nothing Phone 2. This is my beach ball of death cushion just behind me, and it's done a really good job. The colours are nice and vibrant, the white balance is right, the dynamic range is pretty good as well. It's a good photo. Now let's look at the iPhone version. This is the exact same cushion in the exact same conditions taken by the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and it has ruined it. Just to put some context around this, the cushion is just over there, and then to the right of it we have this kind of blue wash of light, and the Nothing Phone 2 isn't troubled by that at all. The photo that phone took of that cushion isn't blue. The photo the iPhone took of that cushion is completely dominated by that blue light. I think that's quite disappointing, although it does speak very highly of this phone. As for the rest of my test shots, I think the iPhone photos are definitely sharper and at times more vibrant, but despite this, the Nothing Phone 2 sometimes delivers better dynamic range, as you can see in this photo of my studio. Both of these devices have their own photographic look, and your favourite will depend entirely on your personal preference for photos. As I always say, guys, this is one of the most subjective parts of a smartphone comparison, but where it completely falls apart, frustratingly, for the Nothing Phone 2 is the complete lack of optical zoom ranges. You don't get them, basically. We get a 2x, but it's just the main sensor digitally zoomed in, and it's rough. You can see that in this comparison here between the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the Nothing Phone 2. This photo of Warwick Castle on the iPhone zoomed in, I think looks fantastic. On the Nothing Phone 2, well, look at it. When it comes to selfies, I think the Nothing Phone 2 is on a par with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is really impressive and very important because we all love taking photos of our own faces. Moving on to video, and let's start with that front-facing camera. So this is the selfie cam on the Nothing Phone 2, 1080p, 30 frames per second. I'm filming these test shots in portrait mode because that's what everyone does these days, so it gives you a good idea of how these two phones cope with that. I've done nothing to the video, nothing to the audio. This is straight out of the phone. And this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 4K, 24 frames a second. I know that's quite a bit different to the Nothing Phone 2, but this is what you get with the iPhone basically over the Nothing Phone 2. So again, haven't changed anything in terms of the audio or the video. Let me know what you think. When it comes to shooting video on the rear camera, the Nothing Phone 2 isn't bad at all. I think the image quality and the dynamic range is almost as good as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Unfortunately, and like so many Android phones, where the Nothing Phone 2 lets itself down is with the stabilization. It's just a bit weird. The iPhone 14 Pro Max, like so many iPhones that came before it, has fantastic image stabilization. The Nothing Phone 2, on the other hand, is just a bit jerky and not very pleasing on the eye. So what about that special something? What has this phone got that other phones don't have that could make it a flagship contender? Firstly, it's not the glyph interface. Those flashing lights are just a gimmick. It's actually the operating system. That's right, Nothing OS 2 is a fantastic addition to this phone. It really sets it apart from anything else on the market. They've just taken everything that's fantastic about Android 13 and put their own stamp on it, unlike lots of other Android manufacturers who take Android 13 and destroy it. And if you compare Nothing OS 2 to iOS 16, the latter just looks like a very boring, straight-laced colleague who you do not want to take down the pub. Conclusion time. Is the Nothing Phone 2 better or as good as the iPhone 14 Pro Max? No. Objectively, it was never going to be. This is 620 quid cheaper than this. And that's at the base model. If you buy the most expensive iPhone 14 Pro Max and compare it against the most expensive Nothing Phone 2, the price difference is £1,050. These are massively different smartphones. The iPhone does have a much more flexible and convenient camera system. It has more headroom when it comes to performance. The design and build quality is just a notch above the Nothing Phone 2, and it has access to the Apple ecosystem, which is a completely unfair point of comparison because, like I said earlier, the Nothing Phone 2 doesn't have anything like that. However, just imagine a world where this had a much better camera system and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip. This would be in trouble. And what's exciting about that is that those changes aren't rocket science. They're not kind of pushing for the sky. These are simple spec bumps. And I think Carl Pei knows that. In fact, he definitely knows that. He's a smart guy. It's what Nothing does next. It's the Nothing Phone 3 or whatever they decide to call it that will define their place in the smartphone market and potentially cause a very big problem for the iPhone. I would love to know what you guys think of this, so let me know in the comments, and if you want to see my full review of the Nothing Phone 2, keep watching for a link.